What's up, Alex? Thanks for coming back on the show, man.
Absolutely, dude. I am glad to be back, my friend. How have you been?
Good, man. It's weird up here. I still haven't really done that much fishing, because I'm up in upstate New York, and we're in
Yeah,
that weird time, right? Where it's like any day now, shit's gonna be fire, but you still
yeah,
gotta go out there and you gotta do your time. And water temps are like 38 to 41, and you're just like,
yep,
just brutal. I know. Our mutual friend Bailey. I think he's smacking them right now. Um,
yeah,
but like I haven't been out since last week. I was on Oneida, and water temps were like 40. I found some warm water that was like 44, 45, and you could see some of the bait fish. And I caught
yeah.
a few pike and stuff, or pickerel and stuff like that. But like the main lake was
Mhm.
still like 40, 41 degrees. But and then we had that cold front come in this weekend and
Mhm.
freeze everything again. But like this week, it looks perfect. Like it's in the 60s during the day, 40s at night. It's like I'm going in the mornings. I'm hoping it's finally that day where like you go out there and you just can't stop catching them. But
Heck yeah,
other
dude.
than that, man, just normal shit. Getting
It's doing life, right?
yeah, yeah.
Life just carries on, man. I mean, if there's one certainty in all of it, right? The fish keep on swimming and life carries on, and we just got to kind of saddle up and ride and
Yeah,
see what we can get done. You know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean?
Wait for those good days, man.
That's right. That's right, dude. It's coming, man. Yeah, Bailey's been smashing their face in, dude. You know, he's always posting big fish pictures. Like you guys live in a special place because
Very,
like they got a cap on top of their head 6 months out of the year, and so
yeah,
like they get a reset. You know what I mean?
right, yeah,
And like, dude, it's so hard for our fish sometimes because they don't get that reset. They're just constantly pressured. Like the first, well, I'll tell you this much: there wasn't a day on Lake Chickamauga. You know, Lake Chickamauga is about 2 hours from me, but I fished there quite a bit. There wasn't a day or a weekend day on Lake Chickamauga that there wasn't at least 150 boat tournament all year long. Like it never stops, dude. And it's just crazy, man.
what do you think about that? Like, I know you're an avid, you love the fish. There's
Mm-hmm.
also this part of like taking care of your resources. Like don't get me wrong. I'm like I want to fish all year round, and but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, as you get older, you start looking at things a little different, and you start to look like what's the best for like overall in the big picture. And like
Mm-hmm.
up north in like Jefferson County, where like closer to like the St. Lawrence River is, and Henderson Harbor, and like some of those big areas, dude, you can't even fish bass there until third week of June.
Mm-hmm.
They shut down, and they do it to protect the fish. They give them that time to go and make babies and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, and then
Mm-hmm.
season. But like at some point, like you want to take care of the resources and just beat them up year round, putting hooks in their face, pull them out of the
Mm-hmm.
water, throwing them back in the water, bringing up, catching a fish here, letting them go over there. I mean, just like they're warriors, but even warriors at some point, like they need a break.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't fight all the time.
Even the 300 eventually got defeated, right?
Yeah,
You know that
exactly.
they're the baddest dudes in history, but eventually got defeated. You know, I think it's a complicated issue, right? I've had a lot of conversations with people who are a lot smarter than me about this topic, right? And I kind of formulated my opinion off those conversations that I had with those people, you know, more specifically biologists, and especially here in my state. Up there where you guys are at, I've not had the opportunity to speak to biologists up there, but I have spoken to biologists in Michigan. And in Michigan, they have a similar law to upstate New York. You can fish for the fish, you just can't keep them, right? And I don't think fishing and keeping fish during the spawn is the issue. Because all the biologists I've talked to, you know, they're very adamant in the fact that you cannot hurt the spawn of bass because there's more bass that spawn in a given area than you could ever imagine. And they spawn in a way that, you know, that they're laying hundreds of eggs at a time. Well, if you've got 100 fish in an area that all lay 100 eggs, that's 1,000 eggs. Well, let's say across the whole entire lake, you've got 100,000 fish that lay 1,000 eggs, or 100 eggs. You know, dude, it's just a compounding factor,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's the issue. I don't think, spawn fishing and bed fishing is an issue. Tournament fishing, on the other hand, I think that's where you do start to play in a little bit of an issue because you see like a Kentucky Lake, for example. A few years ago, Bass went to Kentucky Lake, FLW went to Kentucky Lake. Jason Lambert won a couple. I think Evan Evers won one before he switched over to MLF. And that lake had an immense amount of pressure on it. And every weekend you would see these 150, 200 boat tournaments where these guys would catch these fish out of 25, 30 foot of water, and they'd bring them to the scales, they'd weigh them, and then they'd put them back, and all the fish went belly up because they're swim bladders. And so you were having these massive fish kills weekend after weekend, hundreds and hundreds of fish. And so, what was happening is you were taking these really quality, like 4 to 5 pound class fish, these class of fish that you want to make babies, right? That you want to be one of those that goes up there and makes a bed, and you're just taking them out and you're killing them.
Right.
And I think those kinds of things start to hurt lakes, and on the flip side of that, the biologist will tell you too, there's more fish in an area than you could ever imagine. But on certain lakes, if you look at them, if you take fish out of an area, those fish may never come back to that area again. And if they do come back to that area, they'll never come back to the original state that they were. That doesn't mean they're not going to be somewhere else. It just means in that area that they won't be there. And so all this being said, right, it's long, drawn out, a lot of wind coming out of my face right now. My position on this is I believe tournament fishing is a good thing. I believe recreational fishing is a good thing.
Yeah.
I just believe that you can have too much of a good thing, right? I think what we need to start doing, and I would advocate for this, and this is a conversation I've had with several of my friends, and I was actually going to bring this up on my live stream very, very soon and just kind of have a little mock debate with Ben about it and let Ben play the devil's advocate, and I was going to be the guy with the idea, right?
Right.
Is that if you're going to have tournaments like they have here in East Tennessee. I mean, constant freaking tournaments, dude. They're constant, right? They never stop. All winter long, all fall, all spring, all summer. I mean, it's constant. I say we impose some sort of regulatory system upon that, right? So every single year I buy a freshwater fishing license and I buy a trout stamp. All in all, it's about $65. I buy a $5 commemorational card just because that $5 goes back into conservation. Mm-hmm. All right, $65 total for my whole shebang. Every year when I go to Michigan, I pay like $75 for a year-long fishing license when I go to Michigan, even though I only go up there maybe 2 weeks out of the year. I still buy a year-long just to buy into their conservation system because I feel like if I'm going to use the resource, I want to buy into their conservation system, right? I wouldn't mind if someone said, hey, if you're going to fish tournaments or if you're going to use this boat ramp to fish a tournament, you got to pay an extra $5 or you got to pay a $25 ramp, like buy a ramp card. Up in Michigan, all the ramps I've ever been to in Michigan are pristine, man. When I say they're pristine, there's a couple things I like to see at a ramp. 3 things that I really like to see at a ramp. I like to see, obviously, a good boat ramp. Mm-hmm. I like to see a good dock for me to go hook my boat up to and then walk on. And I like to see somewhere I can use the bathroom.
I was waiting for that. Because I was thinking that your name always stands like at least the Porta John.
Exactly, man. Somewhere to take a dump if I need to, right? Like a good place. And I want it to be well lit. I want it to be safe. I don't want someone to bust my windows out, right? Yeah. Well, up in Michigan, Ben every single year buys this little card and it's a little sticker he sticks on his truck, and it allows him to use every boat ramp within the state that's a public boat ramp, right? I wouldn't mind paying for that too, just as long as that money is going back into conservation somehow. Because right now what we've got is we've got guys that are driving from out of state. They're driving from all over the state. They're coming in and they're fishing these tournaments. And yes, they're buying fishing license. That's fantastic, right? I love that. They're buying fishing license, but they're still using the resource in a way that I think is not the best for it. Mm-hmm. And so I think there should just be an extra little something to impose upon that. And I hate to say tax because everybody runs away when we say tax. I hate taxes. I mean, dude, I can see your Second Amendment thing hanging up there on the wall. I mean, I'm Second Amendment, hate taxes. I mean, I'm the most, libertarian, like just leave me alone kind of guy in the whole entire world. But all at the same time, what is the most amazing thing about the North American model for conservation is that it works, and it works very, very well. Right. If you look at every other country in the world, they suck at conservation. We don't.
I don't even know. Like when you think of other countries, there are those few exotic places, but where else can you go anywhere in a country and hunt, fish, and have good hunting and fishing year round? You look at Europe and some of these other places. I don't even know if they have any wild animals anymore.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. I mean, and nobody else does it like we do it. Nobody. Right. And there's people, I'm sure, there's a guy that watches my stuff. He's from Australia. There's some other guys, that have said, they've told me, man, no, you're right. Like nobody does it like you guys do it. So we know how to do it. And, and you have things like the Robertson Pittman Act. Every time you buy a piece of ammunition, you buy a gun, you buy anything, there's a small tax put on it.
Mm-hmm.
That tax is then put into an account and then is divvied out to the state. It can be used for nothing but conservation in the state.
Yeah.
Why can't we do that for fishing across the board, especially here in Tennessee, man? You know, some of those northern states, you guys are more into that kind of regulation. I would love to see that down here because I live in a special place where, you know, it's not Sam Rayburn, but it's also not Podunk County, USA. We're kind of a special in the middle where we've got some really good fishing. It may not be the best in the world and world class, but we still got some awesome fishing. But if we don't take care of it the right way, it can get screwed up really, really fast. Yeah. So after that 10-minute explanation there, that's kind of my viewpoint on that. I mean, dude, let me tell you something. There's not a lot I get jacked up about. But people know my channel, man, I'm very conservation focused. I'm free land, you know, public water, public land, free use. I want that. Like, that's the beauty about America. And if we don't have that, dude, we don't have anything, in my opinion. Right. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, I mean, it's like, I agree 100%. You know, one of the things that I worry about up here, because, you know, we have like world-class smallmouth fishing up here, but we don't treasure it like we should. In the sense where you look at places like Texas, where like they're constantly trying to make the biggest bass in the world. You know what I mean? They're down there. Everyone's involved. Like they're breeding fish like dogs down there. You know what I mean? To make their bass fishing some of the best bass fishing in the world. We don't really do that much up here. Like we put a lot of our resources into like the salmon fishing, the trout fishing, and things like that, but not into like our bass or smallmouth and things like that. Like we treasure our walleye up here, but like, there's not much going on to, you know, to kind of like protect our and to I guess to make it better, like our smallmouth and our largemouth up here. It's weird. Like you go to other places and you see them like how much they treasure their bass, and because they know that brings in like a lot of tourism, brings a lot of like revenue and stuff like that. But for some reason up here in upstate New York, we don't do that yet.
Yeah, you know, I think it's just I think it's an avocation process, right? I think it takes guys like you, and it takes guys like Bailey. It takes people with platforms, right? Like we're lucky to have a platform to speak on, you know. And people tell me all the time, man, I've only got 1,000 followers or whatever. You still a platform. Like if you can reach 250 people, I mean, let me tell you something. Most of these public meetings that they have, and these public get-togethers that they have, where people can come in and voice their opinions, ain't nobody shows up. Dude, if you can get 250 of your buddies to show up to one of these things, it's going to make a huge impact. Right. And I think when we start advocating on the grassroots level, as well as you start taking a picture of, Bass and MLF, they come to New York for a reason. Yep. And the reason is giant freaking smallmouth. And they're willing to bring that money in there because of giant freaking smallmouth. And so all you got to do is money talks, man. You just got to make the money talk to the right people. And then everybody's focus goes, oh my God, we need to grow 6-pound and 7-pound smallmouth. Like, we get it now. Yeah. And that's Dayton, Tennessee. Dayton, Tennessee is alive today, literally, economically alive today because of money around Chickamauga Lake. People come to fish chick because of 10 and 11 pounders. They want to catch them. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's all it takes, is just getting enough people to make enough noise, and then getting the money to talk. And when you can make those two things work in, coherency, man, you've got it going. So,
well, cool, man. It's crazy how my show goes sometimes. I have these things I want to talk to you about. Next thing we're talking about protecting the bass, and
dude, it's a rabbit hole, son. Yeah, it's a rabbit hole. Yeah. Anybody that ever listens to my podcast, watches any of my videos, you just know it's like we're going this direction, and then it's a 90-degree turn, and we're off this way.
Here we go. Next thing you know, it's time to go home, go to sleep. But I've had you on the show before, but it's one of these things like podcasting. You get better at it, and you get better at questioning people. And you were one of the different people I brought on my show. It's a kayak show, but it's not much of a kayak show anymore. It's whoever I want to bring on. But I'm getting better at questioning. And I remember when I got done with you and I started watching more of your content, I'm like, God damn, there's so much more stuff I wanted to ask him, and I wanted to ask him in better ways. So this is my second attempt to get what I want to get out of Alex Rudd. But something that has been weighing heavily on me this season. Because each season you get better at fishing, and each season you go into the season with different ideas to make to maximize your time on the water and to be more efficient at catching fish. And something that I didn't think about in the past. When I'm doing these tournaments, is you're doing your tournament prep, and you're looking at the maps, you're looking at the fishing reports over the years. And something that I never really considered are those other variables like the weather conditionings, the water temps, and all and the barometric pressure. All these things that I didn't really think about. And now that I'm looking back at it, like, I was like, oh, I probably should have thought about that stuff. Like, one day when like the fish were on fire, the next minute they weren't. Like, why weren't they on fire the next day? What changed that? It wasn't my lure. It wasn't my. I did everything I did the same day before. It was these other things that were happening that I didn't play an effect in my planning. In which I think if you're gonna be a tournament angler, that's probably what separates the best from like the average, or the ability to like to understand those different variables and to apply whatever you need to do to whatever to be successful on those days. And so I know that you fish around a lot of different places in the country, and you're always catching fish, and you're always trying to learn. So a lot of things I want to like when you start planning to go on a fishing trip, or whatever little tournaments you do. I know you're dabbling into the kayak tournament scene, but like I want to start understanding like some of these variables. And then it is a huge topic, so I don't really know where to begin. But I think weather would be, that would be like the first place to start, especially look at where I'm at now. All the changes that are happening rapidly in upstate New York. Like, like we're spring, but we're not quite spring. One day it's 60 degrees, the next day it's 30 degrees. One day like they're moving up, the next day, where the hell do they go? So like I guess that's kind of how I want this conversation to go. Like when you're planning to go fishing, like how do you look at those different conditions to make yourself successful, so you're not wasting your time when you show up on a new lake or a lake that you don't fish all the time, or any lake.
So let's blow it out just a little bit more, right?
All right.
So you say the weather. Okay, so there's a big driving factor of the weather, all right? And it's that big yellow thing that floats up in the sky, right? The sun.
Yeah, the sun.
Dude, I answer this question the same way every single time somebody asks it to me. I think the biggest driving factor are the photo periods that bass experience. Because for anybody that's outdoors any amount of time, whether you hunt, you fish, whatever you do, there's one thing that you will see over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. The sun drives every single living thing outside.
And that's
everything.
That's like like when you look at like ancient man, like our patterns, our eating patterns, everything. I mean, they made religions based off what the sun did at certain times of the year,
Exactly, man. I mean, the sun is everything, right? And so I think the first thing you want to look at is your photo periods and your moon phases. I think those two factors are very, very overlooked as far as bass fishing goes, right? A lot of people want to look to the water temperature first, which that's very important, and we're getting there, right? We're getting there because the sun drives all of it. I mean, the sun is going to affect the temperature. The sun is going to affect the water temperature. The sun is going to affect wind. We say solar winds. Well, it's because during the day we have more wind than we do at night, because the sun literally creates wind on the surface of the earth based on radiation that hits the earth. I mean, like it's nuts to think about, but it's the truth. Right. And so that's the first thing I start looking at. What's my moon phase, and look at my length of days. The reason that you have such drastic changes going on right now in New York is because the length of the days, they're getting longer and longer and longer. And so like it's going to have to start warming up at some point, right? Because we're having more sun hitting our part of the world, and we're getting closer to the sun. The tilt of the earth starting to tilt towards the sun, and it's starting to just get warmer and warmer and warmer. And so I think that's one of your biggest factors. I think then once you look at that and you go, man, I got a good understanding of the length of days are really what's going to play into the weather being what it needs to be. That's when I start looking at the more micro instead of the macro, and I start looking at the weather in my individual area.
So right? Because what do you mean by macro and micro? Because I feel like that's a good thing to think about. What do you consider that?
So like micro is me, the small thing, like my area, my experience. The macro is the big picture, right? So like if you look at the macro of anything, you're looking at the ginormous, like, okay, well, the earth is literally physically tilting towards the sun, and like we're physically going into spring, and like, the cosmic powers that I can't control are literally doing what they're doing, right?
Right.
And like people are probably sitting there thinking, oh my God, this guy. Well, listen, I'm a second grade teacher, and we teach this stuff, all right? So like I'm getting it all out there for you guys. Then you start looking at the micro, which is us, like it's our individual experience. Even though we're both experiencing the macro, the big right now, our micro is two totally different experiences, right? Where I live in the country, man, I'm already having 80-degree days. I've already got.
You're good. Little man's got to go to bed.
Oh, awesome. They
do this to me every night. So.
I love it. You're good.
Hey, Patty.
Say bye to Daddy.
All right, give me a kiss. Love you, buddy. Okay, go to bed. Get out of here. Sorry. I got to do better about scheduling these podcasts because at 8:00 he always comes in and this time you got to give Dad a kiss and stuff. So, but
That's all right, man. That's all
carry
right.
on with the macro and the micro.
You're good, man. So our micros are very different, right? Kind of what I was saying is that, right now I'm experiencing spawning fish. I'm having 60 and 70 degree, 80 degree days. I'm getting high 50 to low 60 degree water temperatures, where you're experiencing a very different set of experiences, right? So when I start looking at kind of what are the most important things to me in a fishing day, first thing I'm going to look at is what's the weather going to be doing. Simply, it's easy as looking at your weather app, even though we both know that thing's wrong 90% of the time. Still get a good general idea. Like, am I going to be dealing with rain? Am I going to be dealing with snow? Is it a high pressure? Is it low pressure? Is it going to be high bluebird? Are we post front or are we pre-front? You know what I mean? And those are all huge factors. And so, just kind of as a general rule of thumb, if we're pre-front, that means it's a low swirling pressure. Low pressure prefrontal conditions bass want to eat, period. That's just kind of the general rule of thumb. Post front is high pressure. You can always remember post front is high pressure because we have high bluebird skies. So there's no clouds in the sky, high sky. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Most of the time, in most situations, bass don't want to eat post front. And so pre-front, you can get away with throwing those more reactionary style baits. You can throw your chatterbaits and your jerkbaits and your crankbaits and your stuff like that. Because with those prefrontal conditions are going to come the inherent things that make those more reaction style baits better. Wind, rain. Chop on top of the water, cloud cover, intermittent cloud cover, the things that make bass want to eat reaction style baits. Whereas when you go to that post front, what are we going to have? No wind, high skies, big old sun in the sky, and you're going to have to slow down. That's when you're going to start throwing the Ned and the drop shot and the shaky head.
Isn't that kind of weird? Like, as a kayaker, like, excluding the people that have like the spot locks and stuff.
Yeah.
The post is like not the easiest time to catch fish, but the easiest time to get on the water and have a good, because, and you're right, the bad conditions bring in the best fishing, but those are the hardest days for us because you have to worry about the wind direction. You got to worry about there's safety issues that got to be considered, but that's the best time to catch fish.
It is, man, and it is, and when I'm in my kayak, see, that's a huge factor. We can talk about that since we're kind of on the subject. When I'm kayak fishing, or especially kayak tournament fishing, because that's, I love to go just recreationally kayak fish. I love it, but I really do like kayak tournament fishing. Don't like boat tournaments, love kayak tournaments. Yeah. They're fun to me, and that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. But I look at a lot of factors. Like, if I'm pre-front and I know I'm going to be dealing with wind, rain, and just suck, like, I'm going, okay, I know that there's areas that I can be protected from this, but still capitalize on the conditions themselves.
Right.
And that's where, going into the next point, is where your map study is going to be your best friend.
Right.
So, like, looking at your map study and understanding, okay, the wind's going to be blowing out of the west at 15 to 20. Well, if I can get in this east-facing pocket and get some of kind of that black flow of that wind coming into this pocket, I'm still going to be able to capitalize on the conditions, but I'm not going to have to deal with the crap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's been like that was when, like, last year when I finally braved the elements and started fishing. You're fishing the wind that the way you're supposed to fish it, and before that I used to avoid the wind. Like I'm going to a cove or a pocket where I can get completely out of the wind. But that one time I got brave, and like the next thing I know, I'm getting like just can't stop catching them, and they're good sized fish. They're up there, and it was at that time that I realized, like, oh, you have to fish these if you really want to get the quality fish. You got to go out here. But then you also got to think about the safety. But you're right. There's ways that you can do it if you look at the map and you look at the way the land is. Like, you can make it work, but it takes a lot of trial and error, a lot of experience and things like that. But yeah,
and it does. And I mean, and that's the biggest factor, right? You just got to get out there and go play with it. You got to go fish. I mean, and it sucks because, I mean, we're dudes that work. We got jobs, we got families, we got crap we got to take care of, right? And so, like, we get maybe 1-2 days a week to go fishing. I'm lucky, and I tell people this all the time. I'm a summer fisherman because I'm a teacher, so I get my summers off. It's when I have all my time to fish, and so that's when I'm good, But like, everybody else, we're working guys. We got to get out here and we got to grind. We got to figure it out. But the thing is general rules of thumb still apply. I mean, like, see which way the wind's blowing. I can promise you there's going to be bass on the bank that the wind's blowing into.
Yeah.
Those things they're lazy, man. They're the ultimate predator, but they're also lazy. They want to sit there and they want that bluegill coming to them, and then they're going to kill it. They don't have to go chase the bluegill down, most of the time, right? And so it is trial and error, though, man. It's kind of understanding the factors, but that goes back into understanding your sun, how much sun you have, how that's going to affect the fish, and then your water temperature and your water conditions. And that's where those factors really start to play in. And I think a lot of people, too often, they'll look at the water temperature and go, it's 51. These fish, if it's 51, they should be XYZ.
Yes.
But they don't go, but man, the sun ain't set until 4 o'clock. Or the sun ain't set until 9 o'clock now, where it used to is setting at like 4:30, 5 o'clock. I'll tell you, man, that is a huge factor. Because what'll happen is those fish's feeding windows will flip-flop.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you, because I kind of feel like that's where you're going.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the things that I'm starting is there's a window. Like bass are like there's a time they want to eat, and then a time they want to rest and digest and all those other things. And so maybe I don't know if I'm moving ahead yet, but
no, you're good.
How do you what do you do to how do you figure out what a feeding window is when you put these things together, when you put the sun being up, is there anything that you do? Or is it just you just fish an area until that window opens and closes? What are some of the things that you do to kind of and this all goes I know there's no perfect answer for this, but as anglers, I think our goal is to maximize our time on the water, to maximize those areas of those opportunities, whether it's for a tournament or we're content creators, and so we need to make content. So what are some of the things that you think about to figure out when that window is going to be?
So it is a lot of trial and error, right? It's and a lot of this comes from instinctually fishing for me now. And it's where I fish so much, right? I was lucky to fish from a time when I was as big as your boy is. I mean, little bitty, you know what I mean? I don't even remember fishing the first time. That's how long I've been fishing. And so it's instinctual now that I just know that in the afternoon, there's going to be a bite window where these fish, because the water's the warmest it's going to be all day, are going to move up. And you're going to have some of these fish that are wanting to do the boogie and make some babies. And you're going to have some fish that are still pre-spawn. And I'll be able to flip this area and catch fish. You know what I mean? And it's kind of an instinctual drive. But you can look at the factors of the weather to help you. Right. And so, if you approach a lake, and I'm just going to, I'm going to play out a scenario real quick, and I don't know how many people may face this scenario, but this is just a kind of a scenario to kind of play through this idea. I go to a lake, it's muddy, we're post front, we got some semi-muddy water, not like chocolate milk, but it's also not gin clear either, 2 to 3 foot visibility. I'm in a river system where I've got current coming out of a dam. And I've got, 4 or 5 pockets off this main river that I know fish in the history of fishing this lake are going to move up into these pockets that are going to spawn. I get there in the morning, water temperature is 53 degrees. Well, I know all day long I'm going to have that big old sun beating down on top of me, and the high during the day is going to be in the 70s. So I know that at the end of the day, at some point, that water is probably going to hit 60 degrees, and that there's going to be fish that want to be up shallow. Maybe not to spawn, but maybe just for the simple fact that they want to be in the shallow water and be in the warmest water possible.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to capitalize on a bite early in the morning, and I'm going to use that current to my advantage because fish love current. Current is king. Kevin Van Dam said it 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 times more. The number one thing my dad taught me when he was teaching me how to fish is he'd say, son, you know what the 3 most important things in fishing are? I'd say current, current, and current, because it's the truth. Current drives everything, right? And it may be man-made current. It may be artificial current. It may be natural current. I mean, current can be as simple as wind blowing under a dock, and you'll see wind blowing under like a breezeway or a dock, and it's just creating enough to push water through there. That's enough current to hold a fish. Right. So I'm going to use that current to my advantage early in the morning. I'm going to fish that current. I'm going to go try to get some bites, capitalize on it, moving baits, getting reactions earlier in the morning. Now, as that day starts to go on and that sun gets higher in the sky, naturally those fish are just going to start getting a little more wary of everything around them because they're starting to warm up and they're starting to be able to see a lot better than they were early in the morning. So that's when I'm going to go find one of these pockets. And usually when you get into this shallower water that's had sun on it all day, it's going to be warmer. So you're going to have a group of fish that live in those areas that go in there just to get warm and that want to eat. And that's when I'm going to slow down. I'm going to pick up a jig. I'm going to pick up a Texas rig. I'm going to pick up a Ned rig. And I want to start, hitting targets. I'm going to start hitting things, looking for those places that those fish should be. Now, that scenario that I just played out for you was a video that I just put out a couple days ago.
Okay.
And it was because I knew, based on the weather that we had, the water that I saw when I got there, and what the sun was going to do that day, I already had a game plan in my head of what I was going to do. Now, does that game plan always stay? No. In my videos all the time, I say, we're going fishing, we're going to figure it out. I got a plan, but it'll probably fall apart. You know what I mean?
Right.
But this time of year, especially in the spring and what we're dealing with, man, these fish start getting a lot more predictable because they are going to have to eat, because they're going to have to make babies. And so at some point during the day, they're going to eat. And at some point during the season, they're going to make babies. And so it's just starting to look at those factors to figure that out. Now, like you were talking, you're having these freezing nights. The lakes are freezing over. They're thawing out. You got water temperatures in the high 30s, low 40s, just sucky kind of crap, right?
Yeah.
Well, immediately when you say that to me, I'm thinking, well, these fish aren't moved up at all, right? The sun may be right. The sun may be where it needs to be, but these fish are still really, really cold.
Yeah.
And so you've got these fish, and Ben's fish do the same exact thing. And I've experienced this, where it's like they are so freaking ready to go. Like they want to go make babies so bad, but they're just waiting for that one factor to get right. And usually for you guys, that factor is the moon. The moon.
Okay.
So I've seen it, man, up there in Michigan, northern Michigan. And when I say northern Michigan, I'm talking like when you look at Michigan, I'm talking up here almost in Canada, right? Like almost dead even with where you guys are at map-wise, right? I've seen it where the water's 61 degrees. There's not a fish on a single bed. And that moon is almost full. And as soon as that moon gets full, the fish hit the beds. Because they're waiting for a photic period or a light period to get right for them to want to go make that bed. And when that moon is full, bass being the animals that they are, and I've never been able to get a straight answer on why they do this. I do know that bass, 90% of their brain is dedicated to their vision. And so there must be something in their brain that gets triggered that goes, now we can make babies. Okay. And so I think that those are the biggest factors for you guys to look at is like, if it looks right and it feels right and everything seems right, there must be another factor playing into why these fish aren't up here yet. What I mean?
It's really funny that you bring that up because I always feel like New York or the Northeast where I'm at, it's just funny the way fish are because down south, if the water temps are like less than 45 or whatever, like the fish just don't bite. And I'll get here. I promise you, if the water temps stay where they're at for the next 2 weeks, in 2 weeks these fish will be hungry. They'll give up and they'll just start eating. And you'll have it was really weird. Like it happened to me last year. Like the water temps were still kind of cold, but we were just like, let's go hit this little pocket up. And then we got the pocket, and it was like 19, 20 inch, an 18, and 7. Like, it was one of those days where just like. It was like that. It was that day. It was that. It's
like the light switch got hit. Yeah, it was like,
the water temps were cold, and I just couldn't figure it out. And it's happened to me before. I did a tournament at Lake George. They just weren't biting, and and I could see them. And then like the next day, I couldn't keep them out of my boat. Like it was just like, I was catching them on a square bill, a rack bait. Like so they were aggressively, attacking this thing. And I'm just like, it doesn't make sense to me. The water temps aren't much different than they were. This isn't like a war. Like I said, the water temps were like between like 43 and 45 or something weird like that. But they're eating. Like it's like at some point, like, all right, we're not gonna wait. We're gonna wait for the weather to get better.
And there is, I mean, and I've only experienced that up north. It is a very, and what I think it is, what I deal with is I deal with waves of fish. Like you'll have an initial wave and then a second wave and a third wave, and they just kind of. I mean, I'll have fish start spawning in April, and I have fish that don't get done till June. Where your guys fish, where they do have that cap over their head, that ice cap, right? I keep saying cap. I mean, they got ice over their head. It's like it just pushes and pushes and pushes, and then they have a window where everything starts to open up in like May, end of May, is when it really like pops off, right?
Right.
And it's like, I think that they don't give a crap. They're like, man,
Yeah.
I got to eat and I got to screw. And
Yeah.
it's like, let's
Bailey
go.
Bailey was telling me that one day because it was getting around like late May, and the water temps weren't like spawning temps yet.
Yeah.
And Bailey told me like, no, don't worry about the tips. Like they're going to spawn. Like they're like, I don't know, like they're fat with eggs. They don't have a choice. And so like he's like, now you got to figure out where they're going to spawn now, because they might spawn a little deeper now, or they might spawn in weird places they don't usually spawn, but like they're going to spawn because they don't have a choice. It's not like down south where like the weather just gets to a perfect condition, and but it's like it's like, no, at some point they just don't give a shit about the weather anymore.
And I really believe, again, that's when you start seeing factors like the moon start to play, and that's why I brought that up. I mean, like, because you'll have fish that'll spawn, right? You'll have your onesies and your twosies, but like up north is one of the only places, other than outside of like Florida, the South, is where you see these massive waves of just like hundreds and hundreds of fish that hit the bank, they spawn, and then they leave. Whereas down here, it's like I can onesies and twosies them through a humongous like period of time. You guys have like this, and it's like they all push, and then they're all back deep again.
Yeah, it's really funny you say that, because like people down south get excited about the spawn. Up here, I don't really, because it's like we all know there's going to be 1 week, and none of us are going to catch anything. Like, I mean, obviously we'll catch, but it's going to go from being like aggressive and like just PBs out the ass and just crushing them, and then just like for like a week or a few days, like none of us are going to catch shit, unless you're specifically like bed fishing. And even that's tough. But still, it's like for like 2 or 3 days, maybe a week. We all know, like, oh, it's that time of the year, and so we wait, and then like literally, it's like clockwork. Like 2 weeks later, like we're crushing them again, or they get ready and they start feeding again. But it is the Northeast, when people talk and I watch those videos, like tactical bassing, and they're talking about this and I'm talking about that. That's like, that has nothing to do.
Exactly.
Do not watch those videos and think it's good, because it fails me all the time. Like I watch those videos and they're talking about this, talking about that. I'm like, no, that shit don't happen up here in the Northeast.
Yeah. And again, that's the macro looking at the micro, right? Like that is when you've got to go, okay, I understand that I have a very specific set of circumstances that I deal with, that I can try to apply some of this bigger, more broad idea stuff too. Like I've taken things up north and caught fish on it, just like Ben's brought things down here and caught fish on it. We reciprocally learn things from each other all the time. But you're right. You're like 1,000% right. I mean, like guys, Matt and Tim, they make fantastic videos. Awesome videos. But like they have got to experience Tennessee in its fullest by not catching fish, because they've not got it yet. You know what I mean? That's why they've gone to Florida and Texas and back out to California. And they've caught some fish here. And they've caught some fish down in North Georgia and in Western North Carolina and that kind of stuff. But like they're getting to see this micro of the little microcosm that I live in. And then you get to live in your little microcosm and understand how different it is. But then there's these broad ideas that we can all share and catch fish on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah. But yeah, it's funny because I bring people, we talk about, because I'm a big fan of tactical bass. I've learned a lot. But at the same time, when they start getting to like the details, when they talk about spring fishing, summer fishing, winter fishing, I'm like, I can't relate to it. I don't know what it's like to fish a lake that has tons of creek. Like my fish don't have creek arms. They go spawn it. My fish spawn where they eat. Like literally, it's like, it goes from deep to shallow. I mean, you know about the Finger Lakes. It's not like we don't have those weird.
And then they're they're like boom, and you're in shallow water, and then boom. They're glacier lakes, man. And see, that's what I've been so blessed, right? That I've got to experience this, because I can have these conversations with you and understand what you're looking at. You know what I mean? And for people who don't maybe understand it, maybe you live in South Texas and you've never seen a glacial lake. So what a glacial lake is essentially where a glacier set and eventually melted. And that water literally has stayed there and been there for thousands of years and never gone up and down or changed at all. And like, you got to imagine these things are giant sand bowls with grass around the edges, and it's like 200 feet in the middle.
Yeah.
That's it, man. And like, so these fish, they either live right on that drop or they're up shallow spawning. And there's no in between with any of them. No. Unless you're largemouth fishing, and then the largemouth will get in that grass and you can do the grass bite during the summer. And you bluegills and fish and docks and stuff like that. But man, it's not like here in Tennessee where I've got highland reservoirs that are deep and rocky. I've got riverine systems where I'm fishing shell bars, where we have river ledges and creeks and drop offs and little branches and stuff like that. It just doesn't exist up there because it's not even geographically, it's not the same. And so you're not going to have the same experience as me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just go back a little bit, because like, not that we went down any crazy rabbit holes, but like to go back, like if you had to just like real quick, like make a card for someone to look at, like going to a lake, what are we looking at? I know we talked about obviously the sun.
Yeah.
That's the most important. You brought up the moon. Because like I said, like what I loved about this conversation was like, you're right. Like one of the things that I've always thought was the most important thing was water temperatures. And it's always bit me in the ass, because there's been days where like I've caught numerous of fish in 43 or 45 degrees and didn't catch shit in 62 degrees water. You know what I mean? So it's like, I know water temps is important, but there's those other things that we talked about that I think are, you know, are really good factors to consider when you're fishing. So like break it down, make it like dummy style.
Simple, dummy style. I love dummy style. I've loved checklists, right? I love checklists. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the length of the days. I'm going to look at the sun. I'm going to look at the moon. Then I'm going to go to the weather. What's my weather doing today? What has my weather been doing yesterday, a couple days ago, and what's my weather on its way to do? So am I coming off a storm? Am I going into a storm? Has it been hot? Has it been cold? Blah, 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 blah. So I kind of look at the weather as a linear picture, right? Then I'm going to look at water conditions. Water conditions are going to include visibility, water clarity, and water temperature. All right, so get to the lake. You got to look. You got to see. I mean, because you don't know unless you've got something on your phone that you're able to like see those kinds of things. All right, and then I'm going to start looking at bait fish. I'm going to start looking at cover. Like with my eyes, I'm going to start looking like what's going on around me. Like if you pull up to the lake and they're blowing bait fish out of the water, well, you better pick up a spook and go catch some fish on top water. You know what I mean? Or if you get to the lake and all the bluegills are spawning on the bank, where you go, okay, the bluegills are spawning, I can fish bluegill style baits. Or if you get to the lake and you see that all the shorebirds are, you know, sitting on the shore and they're not feeding. Okay, so something's going on here that these bait fish aren't up shallow and these fish probably aren't going to be feeding on them. And that's where that instinctual drive starts coming in. And then once you're on the lake, you know, look at your lake. You guys know your lake better than I know your lake. I know my lakes. You know your lakes. But like, you know, I'm going to approach a Fanger style, glacial style lake completely different than I'm going to approach a Tennessee River system style lake. And so that's where you kind of go back to that the former and go, what's my bait fish? What cover am I fishing? Am I fishing wood? Am I fishing grass? Are my fish on docks? You know what I mean? And kind of go through that factor. But all those factors again are going to fall back onto your formers again. Because if you're in the spring season, you're coming off of a front and it's high bluebird sky, then they're probably going to be tucked up under those docks and you need to go skip a jig because they're going to be avoiding the sun and looking for somewhere to hang out and chill because they probably ate pre-front. Mm-hmm. And so that's the list of factors I would immediately go down and start taking notes. Dude, I used to have notebooks full. Like, not kidding. I would write things down. And I'd be like, oh, on this day, at this time, this was the factor. And what's awesome about what we do, you know, again, we're content creators. We take pictures. Look back at your pictures, man. Scroll through Instagram and be like, you know, I mean, like I looked back on some pictures that I took last year, this exact week last year. Overcast, cloudy, rainy, crappy days on the Tennessee River system with muddy water with a lot of current. Well, I know exactly what I'm going to go do based on everything I just said. So if you can start building that picture and that kind of toolbox and that memory set of, oh man, Finger Lake, wind was blowing, kind of windy, overcast day, and I was cracking them on a jerk bait. And it was almost a full moon, and a bunch of these fish were into 5 to 8 foot of range of water. Oh, there's a lot of factors there that's going to help me to base on what I want to do this year. You know what I mean?
You know what's funny? Like we were talking about this because I'm surprised someone hasn't made a market or made something like, you know, when I was in the military, we had those checklists, right? We had like you know, and we go through them. And if this happened, this is what you do, and this thing. I'm surprised someone in fishing hasn't created like an app, like say someone like FishBrain, for instance, like you know, it puts the data there for you, like what was the conditions like, and what was the you know, things like that. I'm surprised there's not something like there that like a checklist and a pretty much like a whatever, like something
A
that
log book. So
a log book.
there's a company called Angler that I used to work with that actually created a logbook. You've probably seen the little bullseyes. You click them and they go ding. You know, Gene Jensen has them. Tyler has them. I got one stuck on my boat as well. But essentially that's what it is it gives you weather, water, everything. You can go in and put the tackle you were throwing, all that kind of stuff. And it gives you a logbook of what was going on. But you're right. I like the Angler app. I love the guys over at Angler. Is it perfect? No. Is it perfect enough for me to bother with it when I'm fishing? I'll be honest, no. And that's why I don't use it as much. I would love to see a more simplified version where it's something like you said, man, just a checklist like, okay, I want to sit down and take 2 minutes. It was sunny. The wind was blowing this many miles an hour, and I caught him on a jerkbait in 8 foot of water. Yeah. Boom, stick a picture with it and go on with your day. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, no, you're right. Hey, maybe we need to make an app. I don't know crap about making apps, but I'll help you make an app.
Yeah, this might be my next thing. App. Yeah. I don't even know that job entitles, but last question, man, and we'll wrap this thing up. Like, can you really go into detail about the pressure again? Because something that's really been like I never thought about it. I've heard different things. Like from one guy was saying like in a high pressure, their bladders or whatever. Like there's a whole bunch of things, and then there's some people who said it doesn't matter. Like they'll eat when they want to eat. And I'm really curious, like what your opinion is on that. Because I don't have one. Like I said, I hear so much stuff. I'm like, I don't even know, dude. Like I'm not a weatherman. I'm not a biologist. I'm not even a fish guy. But I want to know. But at the same time, I want to be able to look at the weather app and be like, okay, well the pressure's this, and this is what I can expect. Instead of like going out, one thing I'm trying to like not be this year. Not be the angler that uses the excuse, they're just not biting. I know goddamn well there's someone down the lake who's just hammering them right now.
Yeah,
so
they're not biting somewhere.
They're biting somewhere. So that excuse is invalid. I never want to use it again. If they're not biting, I want to know why they're not biting and how do I make them bite. And so this year I'm taking it into trying to think more into it. Like don't make excuses. Like if someone's out there wearing them out, and if you want to be that person, then you need to figure some shit out. And so the pressure thing is. Like I said, I look at different things. I've been watching YouTube videos. I'm just like, I don't think anyone knows what the hell they're talking about because it's one of those things. Like when it comes to like facts and like opinions, you can't argue facts. You know what I mean? No. And so if you're in a debate with someone, more than likely neither one of you are all right. Like you're arguing over opinions, and so I'm trying to figure out it's tough, but I want to kind of understand it better this year.
So I'm never gonna be a 100% on anything that a bass does, right? Yeah. There's some 100% that I can tell you, like what percentage of a bass's brain is on sight, what colors that they see. I mean, they're proving these things every single day, right? We have more factual information now, but like for the most part, a bass is a living creature with a little brain inside of its head that is totally driven by instinct, and so there's no telling half the time what they're doing because that's the thing. A lot of people think a bass thinks. It doesn't think. Like it doesn't have rational thought like we do. It just is totally driven on an instinct, and the instinct drives it, right? So to get to the question about pressure, I have studied and studied and studied barometric pressure and the effect that it has on fish. And there is obviously something to it because I've seen days when they don't want to eat, and I literally have seen them sitting up shallow, and you cast right at their nose, and they just don't even care that it's there. Right. And I think, and we answer the question simply and then we'll get more in detail on it. I think simply that there are times that it does not matter what the pressure is, bass are going to eat. Right. I think pre-spawn, when they're getting ready to make babies, that bass just eat because they know they got to eat because they're going to make babies, and there's going to be a prolonged period where they're going to have to sit on that bed and they're going to exert a lot of energy making babies. They just eat. You know what I mean? I don't think they care what the pressure's doing. Now, on the flip side of that, I think there are factors that when the pressure does play, when bass are pressured, right? Like, we use that term bass being pressured. Well, there's a reason they're being pressured. Is it fishing pressure? Is it weather pressure? Is it current pressure? Is the water gone up? Is the water gone down? And so I think when you look at the factors that affect bass, pressure is one of 5 or 6 things that really affect bass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think pressure alone is going to keep a bass from eating, but I do believe that pressure in combination with dropping water and muddy water is going to keep a bass from eating. I also believe that low swirling pressure with high rising water, and it's 75 degrees and these bass are wanting to spawn, is going to make bass eat better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So do I think pressure totally affects what a fish does? Absolutely not. But is it a factor in what it does? Yes. Now, to answer the question of what does pressure actually do to a fish, there have been studies that I've read on saltwater fish more than freshwater fish. And I don't think there's actually ever been a study done on bass specifically, not that one that I can find, because I'm a geek, dude. I'm a bass geek. Like, I'll read freaking, like collegiate studies on bass and things that have been done. Like, that's what I do in my free time. I'm a weirdo. But I go fishing, I sling kettlebells around, and I read stuff on the internet. That's what Alex Rudd does. But so I read a study about stripers one time, and they actually figured out that with a striper, and this will caveat into another story that I have, that with a striper, that when they put them in a pressurized environment, so they artificially put pressure on top of them, like barometric pressure, that the bass were more willing to eat when they had less pressure on their body than they did more pressure on their body. And so these were striped bass, like stripers, big, I call them rockfish, but big stripers, oceanic or freshwater. I also had a professor in college that was a biologist, and she got her doctorate and wrote her doctoral thesis on redfish, like red snapper. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about how pressure affects those fish, because they would bring them out of the deep ocean and their swim bladders would explode, and they would put them in artificially pressured environments to get their swim bladder to deflate. And obviously that swim bladder, whether it was inflating or deflating, had a massive effect on how the fish actually acted. And so I think, I think if we're in a high pressure, that fish, being the ultimate predator, they're in their environment, right? A fish is driven by really 3 key factors, and maybe 4, and the 4th being that pressure sensitivity. Eyesight, their lateral line, smell, and then I think pressure sensitivity. Because all that lateral line is a bunch of holes down the side of the bass, and inside those holes there's little hair-like follicles. And those hair-like follicles pick up pressure changes and vibrations in the water, and they translate that to sound that the bass hears. So they don't hear like verbal sound like we hear in our ears, even though it's the same exact idea. Like when I talk, vibration hits your eardrum and it causes your brain to translate that vibration into noise that we understand here audible. Bass essentially the same thing, except for it's down a line down their side. And not only can they take the vibration and turn it into sound, but they can also take pressure changes within the water and turn it into sound. So that's how a bass is as accurate as they can be with certain things, is because they can feel it first and then they can see it. And when they can see it, they can kill it. And so I believe that pressure changes can have a ton of effect on a fish, because it may throw them off. And so like when you have a really high pressure and there's a lot more pressure on that lateral line that there needs to be, or there's a dramatic change in pressure and that lateral line's kind of jacked up. I mean, if you're a fish that's totally driven by instinct that either is killed or be killed, and you can't get a good accurate picture of what's going on around you, dude, I'm going to hole up somewhere. I mean,
the whole
like
fight thing. It's like
exactly. Okay. Like if somebody takes my eyes away in a gunfight, I ain't gonna be standing up slinging bullets at somebody.
I'm gonna lay down somewhere until it comes back.
Exactly, dude. I mean, it's like throwing a flashbang in a room and you disorient somebody. Right. I mean, so I don't know that for certain, but I would assume, being a logical human being, that if the bass can sense the micro changes in its environment, that it can sense the macro changes in the total biology and biosphere that it lives within.
Right. So in reality, like what you're saying is like the bass is playing it safe. Like there's it can't go out there. Yeah, it's. I mean, there's as much as it is a predator, there's also other predators that want to get it. And
it's the self-preservation instinct. Right. A bass's self-preservation instinct, the preservation of it. Because if a bass isn't alive, it can't make babies. Right. And a bass's literally main goal in life is to eat. Yes, it's eat, swim around, crap, and make babies. Like that's all they. I mean, as much as that sounds like so, like, oh man, that sounds like a miserable existence. What's an animal? I mean, it was literally designed to function within its environment to make babies and to give us food. And we view these bass with reverence because they are magnificent animals and we don't want to eat them. But I mean, they're for food. And so it's either eat or be eaten. And like that self-preservation instinct will, I believe, override everything else that a bass does. I think if they don't feel safe, then they won't do jack squat. And you can't get them to do jack squat unless you're overriding that instinct. And the only way that I've ever seen to override that instinct is to get them to react. Yeah. Because a reaction bite is literally tricking a bass's brain into eating something that it doesn't even really want to eat. It's just its brain tells it we have to try to kill that because that's the way their brain's wired.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, that's not any more crazy. Like, I mean, like, whatever. Like, that's like one of the whatever. It's one of the most argued questions I think is about like the pressure and things like that, and how it affects the bass. And it's just it's weird. Like some of the answers that I've heard. That was a really good one. Because at the end of the day, they're wild animals, and wild animals act off these certain things, and we're not that much different than them. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're not. We're a little bit more conscious and aware of things, but at the same time, like we still act with a fight and flight, and we still, we still have like these instincts that we try to pretend like we're not animals, but at the end of the day, like we're animals, and so
I mean, dude, when the crap hits the fan, you're either going to fight or you're going to run.
Yeah,
and like, and the bass is the same way, man. I mean, we all have those parts of our brain that it's just we're wired that way. You know what I mean? Like it's just the way we are, man. And bass, you're right. They're not much different than us. Just like a grizzly bear isn't much different than us. Just like a deer is not much different than us. If it's cold and crappy outside, we want to lay down. So do they. Yeah. If it's warm and nice outside, we want to be up. We want to be moving around. I mean, it's just the way they are.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate the conversation. Definitely a lot of interesting things. But yeah, let's talk about you just for a little bit, and we'll wrap this thing up, man. Like you do, like the stuff you've been putting out lately, like as far as podcast wise. I haven't really been watching many videos on YouTube, but dude, your podcasts have been fire lately. You've had a lot of good topics. The guests have been good. I've enjoyed a lot. I enjoyed like the more recent one you did with Bradley Hallman not too long ago. Yeah. That was a fun conversation. But you're a podcaster.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, man. I'm just having conversations with people. Like I have a conversation with you. You know what I mean? Like my whole idea around my live stream and my podcast is to bring people on. And like Bradley, I talked to Bradley, and I've known Bradley for a while, and I told Bradley, I said, hey, Bradley, I want to bring you on, and I want to get to know you in front of all these people. I don't want to ask you a bunch of questions about fishing because that's all people ever ask you, and I don't want generic answers about fishing. I want to get to know Bradley Hallman and have a conversation with him. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of my point of my podcast is just to bring people on, get to know them, and like because I feel like that's everybody that listens to this podcast, I hope that they got a kind of as small as the picture is, they got a little bit of a picture into what I think and what I got going on. And if you agree to what I think and you like what I got going on, come hit my subscribe button. You know what I mean? And that's all I care about, man. Like I just want people to get to know people because I think when it's what makes the world go around just a little bit easier. We're all a lot more the same than we are different. I can promise you that. So
yeah, but man, it's been a good show. Like, is there anything else that you're looking at doing? Because I mean, 2021 still wide open, like maybe a quarter way through the season. Like, is there anything you got planned? Any things you want to do? Like, what's next for Alex Road? I mean, like you're crushing the podcast game. Obviously, you've been killing it in the YouTube. Like all your content's just been amazing. Like, is there anything you want to do? Because one of the problems that like I had an episode with a guy last night. It's like when you get into this, like you don't realize what it is when you get into it first. Like, I make a video, I'm gonna have a podcast, and then you realize that at some point, like there's two things that got to happen, or one of the two. You either got to draw a line in the sand, or you gotta just go. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things, like, it's like you gotta like, okay, I can only do this much, and this is where I draw the line. And then, or it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna be a podcaster, or I'm gonna be a content maker. I'm gonna see where this thing can go, and that's where I think you see guys like you and the tactical bassing guys and the informative fish, like all these guys who have made some success off this, is that they decide that they didn't need a line. And so it's one of the weird things that I've had to like, cause like when you start seeing a little bit of success, you're like, well, what if I did just go ape shit with this? Like, what if I just did like, what if I just went for it? But then it's like, I don't know yet. I still want to maintain some sanity that I have left. But at the same time, it's like, who knows what you can do if you just don't draw that line of saying, like, what are some of the things that you think now, like where you're at now with your podcast and with your content and some of the companies that you're working for? Like, what do you do next? What do you
Sky's
think
the
about?
limit, man. Sky's the limit. It's whatever. Dude, I tell people all the time, I'm down for whatever. If I can make it work within my normal life, right? Because I do have normal life, right? I got a wife, I got a house, I got a family, I got things I got to take care of, right? And there's many things going on in Alex Rudd's world right now that I don't want to talk about here, but like it's just a lot going on that I got to take care of. But let me tell you something. I am full bore. Like I am willing to do anything with anybody. I'm willing to talk to anybody. I'm willing to make videos with anybody to an extent. You know, like I'm obviously not going to go show my butt off to anybody, make porn or anything like that. I mean, you know, if you offer me enough money, I don't know, we might get a little experimental, but no,
a little weird.
yeah. I mean, but for real, man, I'm down for whatever. You know, I got a lot of awesome projects coming up. Monster Bass, I've got a couple really cool things that we're going to do with them. A couple big video projects, right? Like filmmaking video projects. Like we're gonna make some cool crap. I got my Michigan trip that'll be coming up in the second week of June. I'm gonna go up there and just film that in a way that I've never filmed it before, and I'm gonna kind of film it for myself, and film it in a way that may not be what people expect, but it's gonna be really, really cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously, just keep the podcast going, keep the live stream going. Summer's almost here. For me, summer is when I can go, like you say, dude, ape shit, because like I'm bound to nobody at that point. Like I got 3 months off of paid vacation to do whatever I want to do. Well, I guess you can guess what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to go film, and I'm going to go hang out. And I think the biggest thing for Alex Rudd Fishing this year is we're going to branch off from just bass fishing.
Okay.
I have so many cool opportunities to catch giant muskie, to catch giant trout, to catch giant crappie, to go and do creek fishing stuff, and to go and do more kayak stuff. Like there's so many opportunities that are literally within 30 minutes of me, some of them within 10 minutes of me, like world-class brown trout and rainbow trout fishing, 10 minutes from my house. And I've never done it because I'm so hyper obsessed with these bass, which I am still hyper obsessed with these bass. It's, you know, it's how I've got where I'm at. Yeah. But all at the same time, it's Alex Rudd Fishing, not Alex Rudd Bass Fishing. And so I want to go do just a bunch of other cool crap that I've never done and just play with it because it's there and I want to try it. So,
all right. Well, sounds like 2021 is going to be a good year. But
yeah.
Dude, Alex, I really appreciate it, man. Like I get these things in my head, and like I gotta talk to someone about them. It's hard to find people that really want to talk about. Because for one, you want to make sure you pick the right person. Because you don't want to just go ask Joe, like, hey, dude, like, what do you know about barometric? You know, it's like you got to pick them right. And then I always appreciate what you put on. And I know that I know like, one of the things I like about you is I know you put the work in. Yeah. It's not just you're not just a tournament angler or where like you put the work in. Like, and you're a teacher. It makes sense. Like this is what you do. So I really do appreciate you coming on the show and like. And answer these weird ass questions that I get, man.
Dude, I appreciate you having me on. I will come on anytime you want to. You just message me and send me a link, and I will be here smiling with my big old beard, and we'll talk about bass fishing, dude. So,
all right, cool, man. Well, I can't thank you enough. Have a good night, and hopefully we'll see each other in the nearest future. You're due for a trip up here, so
absolutely, I am. I'm going to make it happen.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
See you, man.